The SUV's engine was still warm when Marisa Langford vanished from the town of Jackson, Wyoming, population 8,647. That last day of October arrived with a cold mist sweeping through the Jackson Hole Valley, obscuring the mountain roads and the meadows along Cottonwood Creek. At 5:41 p.m., a staff member at the Family Visitation Center waved through the glass door as the 29-year-old mother crossed the narrow strip of yard separating the building from the parking lot, holding the light blue canvas bag she always carried to every visit with her son. Marisa placed the bag on the passenger seat of the SUV, the vehicle that had been with her for years, the one with the small scratch on the door panel that everyone recognized. The older staff member watched Marisa's figure fade into the purple mist, her gray coat the last splash of color against the dying sunset over the valley. What happened in the following 74 minutes would haunt Jackson for the next 15 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. At the end of October 2002, Jackson, Wyoming, entered the early stages of winter, with a biting cold air creeping through the valley, thin fog clinging along the roads leading out of town, and the pale yellow lights of the small commercial area reflecting off the frost-covered pavement. This was the time when the tourist season had quieted down. Local residents returned to their familiar routines amid the mountains and forests, and traffic became noticeably lighter than usual. Against this backdrop, Marisa Langford, 33 years old, a forensic technician with the Jackson Police Department, finished her shift at the crime scene examination lab late in the afternoon. Marisa was a single mother to 5-year-old Caleb and lived in a small rented house a few miles from the town center. Her work schedule was stable with little variation, and her daily movements were usually quite predictable. On October 28, Marisa's itinerary followed the usual pattern: morning work at the lab, afternoon handling backlog reports, and around 5 p.m., leaving the department to take Caleb to his scheduled supervised visit with his father at the Family Visitation Center on the east side of Jackson. This was a fixed destination every Monday evening, where Evan Rathner, Marisa's ex-husband, was allowed to see his son during the designated hours. Around 5:25 p.m., Marisa drove her familiar dark green SUV into the center's parking lot, handed Caleb over to the supervising staff, and completed the check-in procedures. During that time, all records indicate that Marisa behaved normally, showing no signs of stress or haste. According to the center's logbook, she left the main lobby area at 5:41 p.m., walking out to the parking lot to return to her vehicle. This was the last officially confirmed timestamp of her presence. From that moment onward, no witnesses reported seeing Marisa leave the area, no calls or messages originated from her phone, and no immediate unusual activity was noted. By 7:30 p.m., when the visit ended, Marisa did not return to pick up Caleb as she normally would. Center staff attempted to contact her, but her phone went unanswered. Family members were notified by the center and tried calling multiple times without success. By 9 p.m., concern escalated sharply when Marisa's phone completely lost signal and went inactive. Family checked her home, but she was not there. The vehicle had not returned, and she had left no message or indication of any change in plans. The entire situation was completely out of character for the disciplined, punctual Marisa, leading the family to conclude this was no ordinary delay. After more than 2 hours of being unable to locate her or make contact in any way, relatives decided to go to the Jackson Police Department to file an official missing person report. At the Jackson Police Department, the family's report was received late in the evening, marking the moment law enforcement officially opened a case file and activated procedures for handling an adult missing under suspicious circumstances. The on-duty officer recorded initial information from the family, created the case number, report time, reporting party, relationship to the missing person, and circumstances leading to the report. The file was then immediately forwarded to the on-duty investigative unit, where the assigned officer began reviewing Marisa's baseline information, personnel file at Jackson PD, position as forensic technician, shift hours, time of departure from work, personal details such as residence address, contact phone number, owned vehicle, and her fixed evening schedule on weekdays. This basic data allowed investigators to establish that the disappearance was connected to dropping her son off for a supervised visit with his father, a family-related factor commonly evaluated in disappearances, potentially involving known individuals. The on-duty officer gathered details of the routes Marisa typically took from the Family Visitation Center back home, including the main route via East Broadway Avenue and 2 secondary routes leading into the southern residential area. Additionally, police collected information about the vehicle, dark green SUV, Wyoming registration plates, most recent maintenance status, and easily identifiable features in case reported by the public. In parallel with gathering basic data, the investigative unit contacted all medical facilities in the area, St. John's Health, emergency rooms, mobile medical stations, and community support centers, to verify whether any traffic accident, fall or sudden medical emergency involving a woman matching the description had occurred. The checks revealed no matching patients, ruling out the possibility that Marisa had been involved in a public accident and taken to a hospital without family or police knowledge. Patrol units continued checking temporary lodging locations within town limits, shelters, emergency support centers, and facilities for the homeless. None had any matching records during the evening hours. Based on family information, police obtained the most recent activity data for Marisa's cell phone through carrier records. In 2002, location tracking was not as precise as modern GPS, but the nearest cell tower connection could still be identified. Data showed the last call from her device occurred before she left the center, with no further signals after 6 p.m. The phone went completely offline from that point. No roaming, no background activity, no ping signals, an unusual sign since the family confirmed the device was always kept charged and carried with her during travel. Beyond the phone, police checked all possible credit card transactions from the time she left the center until the missing person report was filed. No purchases for gas, groceries, or payments occurred after 5:30 p.m., further supporting the assessment that she had not traveled to any public locations after leaving the Family Visitation Center. Additionally, investigators reviewed the day's traffic accident reports, considering the possibility that Marisa's vehicle had experienced an incident on outlying roads, but no matching reports were found. With the initial facts gathered, law enforcement began assessing risk level according to the missing person protocol in use at that time. Criteria included sudden interruption of communication behavior contrary to daily habits, the victim's high level of discipline responsibility for a young child making voluntary disappearance highly unlikely, combined with the vehicle not returning home and not appearing on main routes. All indicators collected during the initial verification phase pointed to Marisa being in high-risk circumstances, with the specific cause undetermined but sufficient grounds to rule out short-term voluntary disappearance. The investigative team completed the risk assessment, created a preliminary priority list of areas based on her expected travel route, major intersections in town, poorly lit outlying areas, access points to national forest land, and less traveled sections along the creek. When the official file was classified as suspicious circumstances, high risk, the Jackson Police Department activated Level 1 search protocol, shifting focus from administrative verification to immediate on-the-ground search within a close radius. Immediately after this decision, patrol units were dispatched to the area around the Family Visitation Center, the last confirmed location of Marisa's presence, to begin initial search efforts. The operation started with a complete sweep of the parking lot, checking every parking space and exit route, while cross-referencing the center's logbook to precisely determine the time Marisa left the building and her likely direction of travel, before proceeding to quickly gather statements from individuals present in the area around that time, in hopes of identifying any unfamiliar vehicles, unusual behavior, or noteworthy details immediately after 5:40 p.m. Most witnesses could not recall specific details due to the darkness, low lighting, and low traffic volume. However, A few statements mentioned a dark-colored vehicle leaving the parking lot a few minutes after Marisa exited the building, though no one could identify the license plate. From the parking lot, the search team divided into 3 groups, each assigned one of the main routes the victim might have taken, the direct route through East Broadway Avenue toward the town center, the secondary route via Cash Street leading to the southern residential area, and the less used route heading eastbound toward the more wooded area on the edge of town. Patrol units moved slowly, using high-intensity headlights to detect any signs of collision, dropped items, or unusual tire marks. While conducting the sweep, investigators also scanned adjacent open areas such as roadside clearings, small parking lots, dead-end roads, and access paths leading into nearby forest areas. The objective was to determine whether Marisa's vehicle had appeared anywhere else before the missing person report, while identifying blind spots where an incident or encounter with an unknown party could have occurred. Environmental witness data indicated that Marisa's vehicle did not stop at any commercial establishment in town after leaving the center, increasing the likelihood that she left the area relatively quickly after stepping out the door. While search teams checked the roads circling the town, a report came in from a resident living near the road leading to Cottonwood Creek. The individual stated that around 6 p.m., they had seen a dark-colored SUV pass through the area, heading toward the forest edge. Although the license plate and driver could not be confirmed, the description of the vehicle's shape and color matched Marisa's SUV to a significant degree. This information prompted the command team to adjust search priorities, as Cottonwood Creek lay outside Marisa's usual routes and featured complex terrain with low traffic. The location was immediately added to the urgent target list. The nearest units were redirected to Cottonwood Creek, while remaining teams continued sweeping the central area to avoid missing any details near the victim's last confirmed location. This shift marked the transition from close-range searching to expanding the radius, focusing on high-risk terrain where both the possibility of the victim moving voluntarily and the possibility of interference by another party had to be seriously considered. Upon approaching Cottonwood Creek in the direction reported by the witness, patrol units quickly located a dark green SUV parked crookedly close to the edge of the forest access road, about 2 miles from the nearest residential area. The license plate matched the vehicle registered to Marisa Langford. The car sat alone in a sparsely lit area, with its front end angled toward a dirt trail, the right front wheel nearly touching the wild grass along the creek, showing signs of an abrupt stop or being maneuvered into the position without intent to turn around. The vehicle was discovered in the early evening hours. Temperatures had dropped, and a light frost coated the body and windows, making it difficult to observe the interior clearly from outside. The on-scene commanding officer immediately determined this location had strong potential to become the focal point of the disappearance investigation, and ordered the establishment of a protective perimeter. Stakes and caution tape were promptly set up to cordon off an area with a radius of approximately 30 meters, to prevent evidence disturbance by civilians or unauthorized personnel. Technical personnel began documenting the scene structure, the vehicle's position relative to the road edge, its orientation relative to the forest trail, the condition of the ground surface beneath each tire, and any surrounding marks that might indicate movement. Systematic scene photography was conducted at wide, medium, and close-up angles to preserve every detail before any further activity near the vehicle. A preliminary scene sketch was drawn on site, marking door positions, tire tracks, areas of soil depression, and sections of grass that were bent or broken abnormally. Initial observations showed the driver's side door closed, the rear right door fully closed, and no signs of unnatural door opening. Vehicle lights were completely off. The switch position was not checked immediately to avoid disturbing evidence. A critical detail was the presence of faint tire tracks on the ground behind the vehicle that did not fully match the tread pattern of the SUV. Due to thin snow and frost coverage, the tracks were not clear, but were sufficient for the scene team to note and mark on the diagram for later analysis. Officers continued sweeping the area around the vehicle in search of loose evidence, footprints, or any signs of human movement. Some sections of grass were bent in a direction leading from the roadside deeper into the woods. While the cause could not be immediately determined, they were flagged as points of interest. Meanwhile, another team quickly inspected the vehicle interior from outside through the windows, determining that there were no signs of break-in, no obviously scattered items, and no sign of the victim. These observations reinforced the assessment that the vehicle's position here was not the result of a random accident, but more likely had been driven or abandoned under inexplicable circumstances. The discovery of the vehicle in this condition caused the investigative team to shift the case status from missing person to missing person with suspicious circumstances per Jackson PD guidelines. This change carried significant legal implications, allowing police to expand jurisdiction, increase manpower, and implement additional investigative steps without relying entirely on the assumption of voluntary departure. Once the scene was securely cordoned off, the crime scene investigation team proceeded to the next step in protocol, examining the adjacent area between the informal parking spot and the trail leading deeper into the gently sloping hill region, where the terrain was complex with soft soil, brush, and protruding tree roots. Continuous marking of suspicious points was carried out to avoid overlooking critical evidence in case the victim or related party had moved through the area. A mobile search team was summoned from the town area to begin initial terrain verification at Cottonwood Creek. The search force commander divided priority zones into 3 directions: the direction returning to the main road, the direction deeper into the forest along the trail, and the direction following the creek running parallel to the parking position. All were considered potentially relevant to the victim's movements or those of whoever brought the vehicle there. Furthermore, the presence of tire tracks different from Marisa's SUV tread pattern raised the possibility of a second vehicle, opening the hypothesis that the victim's car had not arrived at this location on its own, but may have been led or followed by another vehicle. These findings were entered into the scene log for use in subsequent analysis. Upon completion of documentation steps, the on-scene command team issued a preliminary assessment. The presence of the victim's vehicle at Cottonwood Creek under unexplained circumstances, combined with unnatural surrounding traces, confirmed this as a key area requiring immediate expanded search operations. Based on the complexity of the terrain and the time elapsed since the victim was last seen, the commander decided to activate the Level 2 search protocol, mobilizing the Teton County SAR team. This included the human scent tracking K9 unit, the mounted patrol unit using horses for rapid access to steep terrain, and an air support unit employing a light helicopter along with a small Cessna aircraft for aerial observation. The objective of this search phase was to sweep the entire sparse forest area, dirt trails, stream banks, and secondary paths extending from the location where the vehicle was discovered, while identifying any items or traces that could be related to Marisa's movements or to the person who brought the SUV to this location. The K9 unit began from the area immediately adjacent to the vehicle door, allowing the dogs to scent along trails leading into the woods. The dogs quickly reacted to a distinct travel direction extending for several dozen meters where the ground surface was still soft enough to retain some scent traces. However, due to the cold weather and southeast winds, the scent quickly dissipated as they moved deeper into areas with dense wind-blocking brush. The mounted patrol unit proceeded along wider trails, focusing on segments likely traversed by vehicles or people, while visually scanning for any unusual objects on the ground or hanging from bushes. Along one trail segment, more than 150 meters from the vehicle location, they discovered a yellow fabric scarf consistent with the description of an item Marisa commonly carried during cold weather. The scarf was mud-stained with a small tear along the edge. It was recorded as potential evidence and flagged for collection by the crime scene technicians according to procedure. Not far from this location, a small piece of dark blue fabric was found caught under a low branch, with a size consistent with a portion of a jacket. The nature of the tear and the way it adhered suggested the item had snagged on the branch as the wearer moved through a narrow trail. Additionally, the K9 unit identified a cluster of faint shoe prints on the soil at the intersection of 2 trail segments. The prints were not sharp due to the light overnight frost hardening the surface, but the overall shape was consistent with women's shoe size. Some prints led deeper into the forest, but were interrupted upon reaching drier ground covered with fallen leaves, making continuous tracking impossible. The air support team reported from the helicopter that the area near the vehicle discovery site contained several patches of brush that appeared bent or lightly broken, running in a line roughly parallel to the direction deeper into the woods. However, from the air it was impossible to confirm whether this was caused by humans or animals. Observing multiple discrete trace indicators, the on-scene commander requested the creation of a detailed map recording all locations of discovered items and footprints, then connecting them chronologically and directionally to establish the primary area of interest. Preliminary analysis indicated that these signs did not point toward the main road or residential areas, but instead favored trails leading deeper into the sparse forest, extending toward a section of stream bank where the terrain became more complex and difficult to access after dark. Based on this, the primary area of interest was established as the northeastern section of Cottonwood Creek Forest, an area with semi-sloped terrain, moderate tree density, sufficient to obscure visibility, while still allowing foot or small vehicle movement. Defining this focal zone enabled the redeployment of resources to avoid dispersing search efforts. The mounted unit continued sweeping lower hills, while the K-9 team focused on soft soil gullies near the stream banks. Air support expanded aerial observation to look for any anomalies in ground color, foreign objects, or reflective glints that might indicate dropped items. During the search operation, investigators noted there were no clear signs that the victim had attempted to return to the main road or escape the area. The traces converged in a single direction into the woods before abruptly terminating, suggesting the person leaving the tracks may have been forced to stop or been transported away by another vehicle at the point where the trail disappeared. Considering the scattered condition of the discovered items, their distribution on the ground, and the trail layout, the scene suggested more strongly the presence of external interference rather than the victim leaving voluntarily or suffering a natural accident. At the conclusion of the Level 2 search phase, the command team determined that despite full coverage of the primary area, using K-9 units, air support and ground teams, no evidence indicated Marisa was still present within the Cottonwood Creek vicinity. The sudden interruption of traces, from fabric pieces and faint footprints to trails leading into the woods being abruptly cut off, made the possibility of the victim moving independently highly inconsistent with the current findings. The compiled evidence strongly shifted the case away from a standard missing person scenario and toward the hypothesis of third-party intervention, compelling Jackson PD to transition to a deeper investigative approach rather than continuing broad area searching. The focus now shifted back to the SUV, the only central piece of evidence, potentially containing key indicators of what happened to Marisa after leaving the center. The vehicle was sealed on-site at Cottonwood Creek and transported to the Jackson Police Department's forensics facility that same night under strict supervision by the technical team to preserve all traces. Once the vehicle entered the isolation area, the secondary scene examination protocol, per 2002 CSI standards, was initiated, beginning the forensic analysis to determine whether suspicious circumstances were present inside the vehicle. Technicians first used wide-angle lighting to document the interior and exterior in photographs before proceeding to open the doors. All contact surfaces, from door handles, steering wheel, gear shift, to the center console area, were photographed in their original state. The team then opened each door sequentially, using specialized gloves, noting the force required and lock response to assess possible tampering. The interior showed no obvious disturbance. The driver's seat remained in a position consistent with Marisa's height per her personnel records, and personal items such as her wallet, employee ID, and small documents remained undisturbed in the lower console compartment. However, the tidy condition of the interior increased the likelihood that the vehicle had been left without signs of struggle, consistent with intentional parking. Blood detection was conducted using UV light and presumptive chemical tests. Technicians scanned the entire floor, seats, door handles, and rear cargo area. No distinct blood pools or smears were observed, though under the front passenger seat floor mat, the presumptive test yielded a weak, scattered reaction, possibly indicating traces of organic fluid mixed with dry soil dust. The quantity was insufficient for a complete sample and could not be confirmed as human blood or any specific origin. Next, the team collected fingerprints using fine carbon powder and gel lifts. Results showed most prints belonged to Marisa, with some incomplete marks, possibly from previous drivers or maintenance personnel. No foreign prints were clear enough for entry into the 2002 AFIS system. In addition to fingerprints, technicians examined footwear impressions inside and around the vehicle. The driver's and passenger floor areas showed no distinct prints from unfamiliar shoes, only small mud streaks consistent with average-sized women's shoes, matching the type Marisa typically wore, according to family information. This indicated no second person had occupied the passenger seat after the vehicle left the center, at least not leaving clear shoe impressions. Several dry soil particles adhering to the door sills and floor were collected for composition analysis. Optical microscopy revealed a mixture of fine sand, rock fragments, and organic material characteristic of the Jackson Hole area, but samples from the vehicle's undercarriage at the scene included additional mineral components more typical of higher elevation soil than Cottonwood Creek. This was noted but could not be precisely sourced due to 2002 analytical limitations. In the rear cargo area, the team found several small dark blue fabric fibers adhering to the carpet edge. These were collected and compared with the dark blue fabric fragment found on the forest trail. Under microscopy, the fiber structure matched in dye color and weave pattern, but the degree of tearing and wear was insufficient to confirm both samples originated from the same piece. Although the two items showed many similarities, an official conclusion could not be reached without DNA analysis or more advanced fiber sourcing techniques. Aside from the fibers, the cargo area showed no foreign objects, no signs of transporting bulky items, and no unusual drag marks or scratches. However, the absence of any clear evidence in the rear compartment drew the examiner's attention. If the vehicle had been used to transport a struggling victim, significant traces would likely have been left behind. The technical team recorded all observations in the report, treating them as indirect data for scenario evaluation. On the vehicle exterior, materials adhering to the wheel rims, such as soil, dry leaves, and a small piece of halved tree resin, were collected. When compared with samples from the forest, the resin composition matched shrub species present several hundred meters from the parking location. However, the wide distribution of this plant type rendered the detail insufficient for directional guidance. In summary, all evidence recovered from inside and outside the vehicle yielded no breakthrough elements, no clear blood, no sharp foreign fingerprints, no distinct unfamiliar shoe impressions, no items belonging to another person, and the soil, fiber, adherent material samples only showed general association with the Cottonwood Creek vicinity. The forensics team's preliminary conclusion at the end of the session was that the current evidence was insufficient to identify specific perpetrator involvement or confirm criminal activity. All leads remained at the level of environmental indicators rather than behavioral ones, placing the investigation into a more challenging phase due to the lack of physical foundation to narrow the scope of suspicion. Immediately after completing evidence processing from the scene and vehicle, the investigative team shifted focus to expanded interviews with individuals identified as having had direct or indirect contact with Marisa in the period immediately preceding her disappearance. The goal was to reconstruct an accurate timeline, eliminate basic possibilities, and identify any anomalies in the behavior or whereabouts of involved parties. Initially, the team returned to the Family Visitation Center to re-verify all timestamps of the victim's presence. The front desk staff confirmed that Marisa arrived at approximately 5:25 p.m. and completed the handover of Caleb to supervise staff a few minutes later. The center's manually recorded in-out log showed Marisa's departed the building confirmation at 5:41 p.m. The supervising staff explained that this timestamp was logged when they observed her leaving the lobby area, but they could not confirm when she entered her vehicle due to reflective glass at the parking lot entrance and limited visibility at dusk. To strengthen the timeline, investigators interviewed the visitation monitor who supervised Caleb and Evan's session and remained in the private room throughout. This staff member stated that Evan arrived on schedule, spent approximately 1 hour with his son, exhibited no unusual behavior, did not leave the room, and showed no signs of haste or stress. However, since observation was limited to the supervised room, the staff could not confirm whether Evan left the building in the minutes before or after the visitation. This record was noted, but deemed insufficient to fully establish an alibi. After completing statements from center staff, the investigative team conducted the critical interview with Evan Rathner, the person most directly connected to Marisa's activities on the day she disappeared. Evan was invited to Jackson PD the following morning to provide his timeline for the relevant period. During the session, Evan stated he left work around 4 p.m. to arrive at the center on time. He described the visitation as routine, talking and playing small games with Caleb, never leaving the supervised room during the entire session. When asked about his departure time, Evan asserted he left the room just before 7:30 p.m., when the visitation ended, and departed the center immediately afterward to return home. Investigators requested additional details about his route, arrival time at home, and any persons who could confirm his return. Evan indicated he arrived at his residential area between 7:40 p.m. and 7:50 p.m., but could provide no witness to confirm his presence at home at that exact time. He stated he went straight home, ate a late dinner, and had no contact with anyone until the next morning. When questioned about Marisa's vehicle, Evan denied seeing her SUV while leaving the center. Throughout the interview, Evan's responses remained consistent but lacked detail, particularly regarding the period from 5:41 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Investigators noted that no definitive data confirmed Evan's whereabouts during the time window in which reaching Cottonwood Creek, the vehicle discovery site, was entirely feasible using peripheral roads. Next, the team interviewed Chloe Myers. Chloe, 23 years old at the time, was a student in the martial arts class where Evan served as an assistant instructor and had been documented as present at the center on the day Marisa disappeared. When questioned about her presence, Chloe stated she stopped by very briefly, only to deliver documents to staff, and did not encounter Marisa. She claimed she left immediately afterward to prepare for an evening training session. When asked for specific arrival and departure times, Chloe estimated she was at the center no more than a few minutes and could not recall the exact time. This required investigators to cross-reference her statement with the duty log. The log confirmed Chloe's arrival at approximately 5:20 p.m., but contained no precise departure time, preventing full verification of her alibi. When asked whether she could have seen Marisa that day, Chloe denied it but offered no compelling reason for failing to notice the victim's movements, especially given their presence in the same building within minutes of each other. While Chloe's answers appeared plausible, they lacked consistency regarding her departure time, prompting investigators to flag this for timeline cross-verification. After completing individual interviews, the investigative team compiled the statements into an event timeline table. Verified data showed Marisa left the center at 5:41 p.m. Evan was present in the supervised room prior, but lacked definitive confirmation of remaining there continuously from 5:41 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Chloe appeared at the center around 5:20 p.m., but her departure time could not be precisely verified, and Marisa's SUV was reported moving toward Cottonwood Creek sometime after 6 p.m. When overlaid on the map, investigators noted that the plausible appearance of the SUV at Cottonwood Creek coincided with the period during which Evan had no witness confirming his whereabouts. This time gap was marked as an unverified interval. Although Evan's lack of corroborating witnesses did not automatically make him the perpetrator, given the case characteristics and evidence concerning the victim's vehicle movements, this unaccounted time period emerged as a significant deviation in the investigative timeline. However, due to the absence of specific physical evidence directly linking Evan to the scene or Marisa's vehicle at this time, the investigative team could only record this as a point of suspicion without yet reaching a conclusion or shifting to more aggressive investigative measures. After completing interviews with the last people to have contact with Marisa, the investigative team moved on to the step of synthesizing and analyzing the timeline to determine the feasibility of each involved individual accessing Cottonwood Creek. Data was compiled from multiple sources: the Family Visitation Center logbook, statements from staff, environmental witnesses, and observations regarding the movements of the dark green SUV. The first key milestone was the last time Marisa was seen leaving the center lobby at 5:41 p.m. From this point, the team reconstructed possible movements. If she got into her vehicle immediately and drove the main route home, she would have been expected to appear in the residential area in approximately 10 minutes. However, her vehicle was spotted by a witness traveling in the opposite direction, leaving the center on the road leading to Cottonwood Creek sometime after 6 p.m. Based on traffic conditions in Jackson at the end of October, light traffic with minimal congestion, the travel time from the center to Cottonwood Creek in 15-20 minutes was deemed entirely feasible. The team continued by cross-referencing Evan's presence at the center. According to statements and confirmation from supervisory staff, Evan was present in the visitation room with Caleb during the recorded period. But there was no clear evidence proving he remained in the room continuously from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. The surrounding areas had limited visibility, and there were no surveillance cameras in 2002, creating an unverified gap between 5:41 p.m. when Marisa left the building and 7:30 p.m. when Evan was recorded leaving the room. When this time window was mapped out, investigators confirmed that if Evan left the center immediately after Marisa departed, he had sufficient opportunity to reach Cottonwood Creek, approach the victim, move the vehicle to the recovery location, and return to the center before 7:30 p.m. Based on average travel speeds and road conditions at the time, the round-trip journey was estimated at approximately 40 to 50 minutes, which fit within the unaccounted period in Evan's statement. However, this was only a temporal possibility, not evidence of conduct. Meanwhile, data regarding Chloe was verified to a more limited extent. Her statement indicated she arrived at the center around 5:20 p.m. and left after a few minutes. The logbook only recorded her arrival time, not her departure, making it impossible to determine precisely when she left. If Chloe's statement is taken as the provisional basis, she left the center before Marisa appeared in the parking lot, resulting in a lower probability of direct access to the victim. Nevertheless, no objective evidence completely ruled out the possibility that Chloe remained near the center longer than she claimed, as no one documented or confirmed her immediate departure. Investigators included this fact in the analysis chart, but marked it as low probability compared to Evan due to limited access to the crime scene location. After completing the timeline sequence, the team proceeded to assess each suspect's feasibility of accessing the scene based on 3 factors: last known location, unverified time gap, and viable travel routes. Evan was assessed as the only individual with a sufficiently wide time window and close enough starting position to complete the trip to Cottonwood Creek. The fact that the visitation took place in a closed room without continuous monitoring beyond center staff made it impossible to rule out the possibility that he could leave the room for 10 to 15 minutes unnoticed. In contrast, Chloe had less direct access potential due to no apparent reason to return to the center after leaving, and no data showing her presence at Cottonwood Creek during the victim's disappearance window. However, neither had physical evidence: no foreign fingerprints in the vehicle, no DNA, no distinctive trace items, meaning narrowing suspects based solely on the timeline remained insufficient. After reviewing all the facts, investigators developed a preliminary hypothesis: Evan had a long enough unverified time gap that aligned precisely with the period when Marisa's vehicle appeared near Cottonwood Creek, and no witness confirmed his presence during that time. However, this hypothesis was only a possibility, not an investigative conclusion. The absence of direct incriminating physical evidence prevented the team from proceeding to any coercive legal measures against anyone. The final analysis concluded that, while Evan was the suspect with the greatest feasibility of accessing the scene based on the timeline, the case still lacked physical grounds to assign responsibility, and the investigation had to continue as an open inquiry without focusing on any single individual. Based on the timeline analysis showing Evan had an unverified time gap, the investigative team proceeded to expand the evaluation of motive factors to determine whether there was any reasonable basis to consider his potential direct involvement in Marisa's disappearance. The primary focus was the child custody dispute between the two, which had been ongoing for many months prior to Marisa's disappearance. Teton County court records showed that both Marisa and Evan pursued conflicting legal demands. Marisa sought to maintain primary caregiving rights, while Evan repeatedly petitioned for increased visitation time and had even submitted a motion to review the entire custody arrangement just 3 weeks before the disappearance. These documents revealed a high level of legal tension, including failed mediation sessions, motions to modify supervised visitation schedules, and court staff notes documenting frequent disagreements between the parties. However, despite the prolonged conflict, no record existed of Evan ever displaying overt violent behavior or making direct threats against Marisa, leaving any potential motive related to the custody dispute speculative in nature. The team noted this conflict in the record, viewing it as a possible source of psychological pressure but insufficient to establish criminal intent. Another line of inquiry opened when investigators examined the relationship between Evan and his student, Chloe Myers. According to statements from the center and some indirect witnesses, Chloe frequently appeared near Evan in various activities related to the martial arts class, where he served as an assistant instructor, and she was considered close within the student group. While there was no official evidence of a relationship beyond teacher-student boundaries, some information indicated that Chloe paid special attention to Evan, demonstrated through proactively assisting at events, coming to the center during his visitation times, and tending to be present in situations involving him. Investigators considered the possibility that if this relationship was more intimate than usual, Chloe might have been drawn into or voluntarily assisted Evan in the event of a conflict with Marisa. However, all assessments of the nature of Evan and Chloe's relationship were based on indirect observation. No documentation confirmed any romantic involvement, nor did any witness report behavior beyond normal interaction. Therefore, this factor was listed as a theoretical possibility, not a basis for considering criminal conduct. From the 2 lines of analysis above, the team determined that Evan's potential motives, including the custody dispute and the unclear relationship with Chloe, existed but lacked sufficient legal weight, although it was possible to construct a hypothesis that Evan was under pressure from the custody battle while receiving emotional support from someone close like Chloe. No specific evidence showed that motive translated into harmful action. In particular, no physical data or witness testimony indicated that Evan had planned or intended to approach Marisa at the time she left the center. During the evaluation, investigators also considered the possibility of someone other than Evan and Chloe having a motive toward Marisa, but no information from her work or personal life pointed to conflict with any other individual. Marisa was regarded by colleagues as professional, not involved in sensitive cases likely to generate serious enmity, and had no history of personal disputes beyond the custody matter with Evan. Thus, although Evan's potential motive carried relative weight in the context of family life, the investigation could not rely on this factor to expand coercive measures. All evaluations served only as supporting material for the timeline analysis and could not substitute for the requirement of physical evidence or verified testimony. The final conclusion of the motive assessment was while certain theoretical elements allowed for the construction of a possibility that Evan had motive related to the disappearance, the lack of supporting evidence prevented law enforcement from taking stronger steps. The file contained no basis for requesting additional search warrants, no grounds for monitoring personal activities, and insufficient cause to place any suspect under compulsory investigation. The investigation entered a maintenance surveillance status, awaiting new information or physical evidence to strengthen the hypothesis. After completing the motive analysis and finding no additional promising leads, Jackson PD prepared an interim summary report consolidating all investigative activities from the time the missing person report was received until search and evidence analysis efforts reached a deadlock. The report detailed the sequence of events: the last time Marisa was seen leaving the center, the time and location of the SUV's discovery, the search areas deployed, items recovered in the forest, vehicle forensic results, timeline analysis of Evan and Chloe, and an overall assessment of the feasibility of each hypothesis. When all data was cross-referenced, the team concluded that no direction met the threshold for further expansion through stronger legal measures: no body to determine injury status or cause of death, no direct physical evidence implicating any specific suspect, and no eyewitness seeing Marisa being coerced or contacted by a stranger upon leaving the center. The lack of physical evidence meant all conclusions remained speculative and could not meet the legal standard required for charging or proposing additional search orders. Vehicle forensic results revealed nothing conclusive: no identifiable foreign fingerprints, no noteworthy DNA, no signs of struggle inside the vehicle, no sufficient blood for analysis, and no trace items belonging to anyone other than the victim. Soil samples, fibers, and adhering materials were too generic to link to any specific individual. The search team in the Cottonwood Creek forest area also found no leads pointing to a hiding place or further movement of Marisa. All traces in the forest were interrupted, showing no clear direction or endpoint. There were no clear signs of an accident, no drag marks, no distinct tire tracks to follow, and no evidence indicating the victim left the vehicle on her own and walked deep into the forest. When evaluating the overall progress of the case, the team determined that after nearly 2 months since Marisa's disappearance, all investigative avenues had stalled. Initial hypotheses lacked corroborating evidence, while expanded hypotheses relied on too many unverified elements. Jackson PD was forced to acknowledge that the investigation could no longer proceed under a traditional model. In early 2003, the Marisa Langford missing person file was placed under internal review protocol for long-term unsolved cases. An independent review process confirmed that the case did not meet criteria for maintaining active investigation due to no new leads, no current risk to the community, and no indication of emerging developments. Accordingly, the official file was transferred to the Cold Case Unit of the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. This transfer marked a status change for the case from active investigation to a frozen file, to be reviewed only upon the emergence of new information, new evidence, or advancements in forensic technology, allowing reanalysis of old evidence. During the cold case phase, the file was archived with other unsolved missing persons cases in the DCI database and received only periodic limited review. From 2003 onward, the Marisa Langford case gradually faded from the focus of local law enforcement. The family continued search efforts without success, while the Jackson community eventually referred to the case only as an unexplained mysterious disappearance. Over the next decade plus, no additional reports, evidence, or statements emerged of sufficient value to reactivate the investigation. The case truly entered a static state, remaining on Wyoming's list of unresolved files awaiting a new indicator that could open the next direction. In early September 2017, nearly 15 years after the Marisa Langford missing person file was placed in frozen status, a local hunter tracking deer in a remote forested area of Bridger-Teton National Forest discovered a human skeletal structure exposed beneath a thin layer of decaying leaves and soil. The reported location was far from main trails, in a gently sloping terrain with many fallen trees and signs of infrequent human presence. Immediately upon receiving the information, Wyoming DCI deployed a forensic team to the scene, coordinating with Forest Service personnel to secure a wide perimeter and prevent disturbance of evidence. Forensic technicians began meticulous excavation. The skeleton was found in a scattered but still broadly articulated state, allowing determination of the basic body position at deposition. A heavily deteriorated athletic shoe was located a few steps away, with the sole retaining some tread patterns consistent with popular women's athletic shoes from the early 2000s. Near the rib area, The team found several dark green fabric fibers, possibly remnants of a jacket or outer layer that had decomposed over time. These material fragments were carefully collected with clean tools, placed in evidence bags, and coated on site. Notably, on a small rock outcrop just above the skeletal position, technicians discovered a tiny fragment of black paint adhering to the rock edge in a color inconsistent with the natural surroundings. The paint chip was collected as potential evidence because it could relate to a metallic, wooden, or vehicular surface present in the area many years earlier. During excavation, the forensic team noted no signs of recent soil disturbance, confirming the body had remained in place for an extended period, consistent with long-term concealment from years prior. The long bones remained relatively intact, though many smaller bones were lightly scattered due to animal activity and natural conditions, requiring the original position to be reconstructed based on overall structure rather than perfect preservation. When conducting terrain measurements, investigators observed that the body location lay below a small slope segment, approximately 20 meters from an abandoned secondary trail. The topography indicated this area was not a place casual hikers would pass through by chance. Instead, it would require deliberate access by someone familiar with the terrain or willing to enter difficult-to-reach ground. The body's position lower on the slope, combined with leaf litter cover, suggested the remains had been placed or dragged there to avoid detection. The forensic team collected all skeletal elements following standard cold case protocol. Each fragment was numbered, photographed, documented with precise location and depth, before being placed in specialized preservation containers. The shoe, dark green fibers, and anomalous paint chip were also transported to the laboratory for detailed analysis. After the bone samples were transferred to the DCI laboratory, a biologist conducted DNA analysis from bone marrow. The DNA separation technology available in 2017 far surpassed that of 2002, allowing a sufficiently clean genetic sequence to be obtained for comparison against missing persons database records. Rapid comparison results confirmed the identity. The skeleton belonged to Marisa Langford, the victim missing since 2002. Identification was corroborated through three factors: DNA match results, comparison with dental records from the missing persons report, and skeletal size morphological characteristics consistent with Marisa's antemortem anthropometric data. At the time the results were announced, the lead DCI investigator noted that the discovery location clearly exhibited characteristics of intentional concealment, a remote, difficult-to-access area, far from commonly patrolled routes, and with no natural reason for the victim to have traveled there and died. The skeletal positioning, distribution of associated items, and spacing between evidence indicated the remains had remained static for a prolonged period, with no signs of the victim attempting to move after being left. This ruled out possibilities such as getting lost, falling while hiking, or entering the forest independently and suffering an accident. Based on the state of decomposition and bone weathering, forensic specialists provided a preliminary estimate that the time of death most likely coincided with the time frame of Marisa's disappearance in late October 2002. No indication suggested the remains had been moved to the location after that period, or buried and later exhumed. All natural indicators consistently showed the victim had been in this position for nearly 15 years. This conclusion was significant because it reinforced the hypothesis that any criminal act, if one occurred, happened in the early phase of the disappearance, rather than as a prolonged or subsequent event. When the DNA confirmation results were transmitted to Jackson PD, the cold case unit immediately coordinated with Wyoming DCI to reopen the file. Case reactivation followed standard procedure. The file status was updated from inactive to active investigation. Relevant agencies were notified, and a schedule was set for comprehensive reevaluation of all 2002 evidence. The discovery of the remains after such a long frozen period was regarded as the most significant breakthrough since Marisa vanished, providing a clear starting point to reanalyze all data, evidence, and relationships. The investigation, stalled for many years, was officially reactivated with an entirely new focus, determining what actually happened on the day Marisa Langford disappeared. Right after the DNA results confirmed that the skeleton found in Bridger Teton National Forest belonged to Marisa Langford, the cold case unit of the Jackson PD, in coordination with the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation, established a special investigative team. This team consisted of experienced cold case investigators, crime scene forensic specialists, molecular biology experts, and materials analysis specialists. The team's objective was to review all evidence collected in 2002, compare it with newly discovered items from 2017, and apply modern forensic technology to create a more complete picture of the case's sequence of events. A dedicated evidence storage facility was reopened, where all 2002 evidence, previously sealed, including soil samples, fabric fibers, adhesive materials from the vehicle, and items recovered from Cottonwood Creek, was inspected for preservation condition before analysis. Next-generation STR-DNA technology was used to extract DNA from any remaining organic material in the old evidence. A portion of the carpet sample from under the passenger seat of the SUV, which had given a weak chemical reaction in 2002, was reanalyzed. This time, improved extraction techniques yielded low-level mixed DNA, though not sufficient for identification. It only recorded that human DNA was present in the sample and did not belong to a single male individual. Although the result was not a breakthrough, confirming that the DNA did not match Evan or any male in the database allowed the elimination of several hypotheses involving the presence of another man in the vehicle at the time of the disappearance. The dark green fiber samples collected from the Cottonwood Creek Trail and from the SUV's cargo area were also reanalyzed using infrared spectroscopy combined with forensic microsampling. New technology identified the fabric as a polyester nylon blend, common in sport jackets from the early 2000s. When cross-referenced with remaining records of clothing Marisa typically carried, the analysis team could not conclusively determine that the two fiber samples came from the same item, but the high degree of similarity in weave structure, dye color, and fiber wear placed them on the list of potentially related evidence likely originating from the same type of garment. While fiber analysis did not yield definitive proof, soil mineral analysis produced more directional data. Forensic geologists compared soil samples taken from under Marisa's vehicle in 2002 with soil from the body recovery site in 2017, using sediment and micromineral analysis procedures. The results showed that the undercarriage soil contained characteristic dolomite and fine shale minerals typical of higher elevation areas above Cottonwood Creek, matching the mineral composition found in soil adhering to the bones and around the recovery site. Although the technology could not definitively prove the vehicle had traveled exactly to the body location, the findings were consistent with the hypothesis that the vehicle had accessed deep forest areas, aligning with a possible body disposal journey. A black paint chip recovered near the body was analyzed using Raman spectroscopy and energy dispersive spectroscopy, identifying the paint composition as acrylic polymer mixed with carbon black and anti-wear additives. The results were entered into the paint comparison database, showing color spectrum compatibility with exterior paint used on many late 1990 CEF pickup truck models. This was significant data because the 2002 file had noted a second tire track near Marisa's vehicle, and discovering the paint chip at the disposal site increased the likelihood that another vehicle had been present at the body disposal scene. The special investigative team documented all new data and began cross-referencing old and new evidence using a systematic comparison table. This table included the main data groups: 2002 undercarriage soil versus 2017 body recovery site soil, dark green fibers from the 2002 vehicle versus fibers from the trail and near the body, 2002 adhesive materials versus 2017 decomposed materials, and the 2017 foreign paint chip versus initial environmental data in the file. Each element was evaluated for degree of compatibility, relevance, and exclusion potential. Upon completing the summary table, the team observed that while most pieces of evidence were not independently incriminating, they formed a logical chain. The victim's vehicle showed signs of having traveled over terrain similar to the body recovery site. Fibers in the vehicle and on the trail shared many similarities. The foreign paint chip proved another vehicle had been at the disposal site, and the overall terrain conditions fit a sequence of events occurring consecutively within a specific time frame. Shortly after Marisa disappeared, these findings were sufficient for the cold case unit to internally conclude that the case no longer bore the characteristics of a simple missing person incident. The fact that previously undervalued old evidence now formed a unified structure provided the basis for reopening the investigation as an active homicide review. With the 2002-2017 evidence comparison table completed, the team had a foundation to refocus the core question: who had the motive, opportunity, and means to transport Marisa's body into this deep forest area? Once the 2002-2017 evidence comparison table was finalized, the special investigative team proceeded to chain of evidence linkage analysis to determine whether the disparate facts collected over 15 years could coalesce into a clear pattern of suspicion. The first focus was on the black paint chip recovered at the body discovery site. After spectroscopic analysis showed compatibility with late 1990 said pickup truck exterior paint, investigators reviewed all vehicles documented in the 2002 file. Evan Rathner, according to vehicle registration records, owned a black 1998 Dodge Ram at the time of Marisa's disappearance. The forensics team requested comparison samples from Evan's vehicle stored in 2002 insurance records and a paint sample taken from the door area of the Ram he currently used. The analysis results showed that the color spectrum, acrylic composition, and carbon black ratio in the Dodge Ram's paint matched the chip found near the body. Although it was impossible to determine exactly which part of the vehicle the chip came from, the high degree of compatibility made the Dodge Ram the most likely source among the vehicles examined. This was the first time a physical piece of evidence indirectly linked Evan to the deep forest disposal site. Next, the team reanalyzed the dark green fibers recovered from the Cottonwood Creek trail and from the cargo area of Marisa's SUV. Under 2017 DNA analysis technology, the degraded fibers still retained trace low-level DNA. The mixed DNA sequence obtained was insufficient for specific identification, but it had two important features. The sample carried female DNA signals, and when cross-referenced with database records, a portion of the marker sequence matched the DNA profile of Chloe Myers, collected years later in an unrelated civil matter. This level of match did not reach the threshold for criminal charges, but it was sufficient to confirm that Chloe had at some undetermined point come into contact with the same or a very similar type of fabric. When combined with the fact that the same type of fiber appeared in the victim's vehicle and on the trail leading into the forest, investigators noted the possibility that Chloe had been present during an event related to the movement of Marisa or her vehicle shortly before or after the disappearance. The next linkage came from soil mineral analysis. Soil adhering to the undercarriage of Evan's Dodge Ram was documented in 2002 scene photographs taken when his vehicle was parked at the center on the day Marisa disappeared. Although the soil was not collected at the time, the high-resolution photos allowed forensic geologists to identify color, grain structure, and adhesion pattern. When compared with soil from the body recovery site, the analysis team observed clear similarities in mineral composition. Both samples contained crystallized dolomite and fine shale, soil types characteristic of deep interior areas of Bridgerton and rarely found at Cottonwood Creek or in downtown Jackson. While not absolute proof, this correspondence strongly suggested that the Ram had likely entered terrain similar to the body recovery site around the time of Marisa's disappearance. After consolidating the physical evidence, the team moved to exclude unrelated individuals. The list of everyone who had contact with Marisa during the week of her disappearance was re-examined: coworkers, friends, extended family members, and center staff. None of them owned a vehicle matching the characteristics of the recovered paint chip or had been documented in the deep forest area based on location data, statements, or related records. Those with alibis in 2002 were reconfirmed through employment history, medical records, or other objective evidence, allowing the exclusion of over 90% of individuals named in the original file. The analysis results simultaneously confirmed there was no evidence indicating the victim had contact with strangers or individuals absent from the 2002 records. All chains of evidence, paint chip, soil samples, fibers, when placed in the same framework, converged on two names: Evan Rathner and Chloe Myers. Evan owned a vehicle with matching paint, had gaps in his timeline, had potential motive, and had compatible soil traces from the disposal area. Chloe appeared in the mixed DNA on the fibers, was present at the center at key times, and had a special relationship with Evan, making her possible involvement or assistance impossible to disregard. The final consolidated results narrowed the suspect pool to just two individuals with motive, opportunity, and physical connection to the evidence: Evan and Chloe. This was a major turning point, moving the investigation into a focused phase in preparation for subsequent steps to test statements, compare behavior, and evaluate the potential involvement of both in Marisa Langford's disappearance. Once the new chain of evidence formed a clear structure and the suspect pool was narrowed to Evan Rathner and Chloe Myers, the special investigative team decided to recall both for re-interview under the pressure of the newly concluded forensic findings. Evan was summoned first. During the session, investigators presented that spectroscopic analysis of the paint chip recovered near the body showed a high degree of similarity to the paint on his 1998 black Dodge Ram. When asked whether the Ram had ever traveled into deep forest areas in the days before or after Marisa's disappearance, Evan completely denied it, insisting the vehicle was used only for work, visiting the center to see his child, and personal activities within Jackson. However, when investigators confronted him with the soil mineral analysis results, showing the undercarriage soil from his vehicle in 2002 was compatible with the geological layer of the body recovery site, Evan could provide no satisfactory explanation, only stating that he might have driven on some dirt road during martial arts training without being able to specify any location. This made his response unconvincing. Investigators then raised the timeline gap between 5:41 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. on the day Marisa disappeared. When asked to describe his activities in detail during this window, Evan stuck to his original statement that he was always in the visitation room, but when pressed about corroborating witnesses, he could only repeat that the monitoring staff knew I was there, even though records showed staff could not continuously observe him. The inability to provide a clear internal timeline made his statement significantly less credible when weighed against the physical evidence. After Evan's interview, the team moved on to Chloe Myers. Given the mixed DNA results partially matching her genetic markers on fibers recovered from the cargo area of Marisa's vehicle and from the Cottonwood Creek trail, Chloe was asked to explain why her DNA appeared on evidence directly related to the disappearance. Initially, Chloe suggested it might have been from sitting in Marisa's car once, but investigation revealed no evidence that Chloe had ever used or ridden in the victim's vehicle. When investigators pointed out that the fibers were found both in the cargo area and on the trail leading into the deep forest, Chloe lost her initial confidence, became visibly flustered, and said she didn't know how that could have happened. The team then moved to re-verify Chloe's 2002 timeline. When asked to restate the time she left the center on the day Marisa disappeared, Chloe could only give a vague window of around after 5:20 p.m., unable to provide an exact departure time, while sign-out logs only recorded arrival. Investigators noted that if Chloe left later than she claimed, she could have seen Marisa leave the building or even approached the parking area. However, Chloe continued to deny it, insisting she left quickly, but could offer no evidence or witnesses to confirm. When cross-referencing Evan and Chloe's timelines for the same day, investigators discovered new inconsistencies. Neither could precisely account for their whereabouts between 5:41 p.m. and 6:15 p.m., the window matching the time an environmental witness saw the SUV heading toward Cottonwood Creek. Moreover, based on travel analysis, if the two coordinated approaching Marisa immediately after she left the center was entirely feasible. This raised the possibility that Evan approached the victim while Chloe assisted from another position, or both participated in a divided role scenario. When asked whether they had met that day, Evan denied any contact with Chloe. However, martial arts class records and some peripheral information showed the two maintained regular contact in the period before and after the disappearance. When asked the same question, Chloe also avoided a direct answer, only saying, "We only knew each other through the class." Both parties' evasion regarding their relationship significantly increased the level of suspicion. After the two interview sessions, the team synthesized all new statements and concluded that Evan could not explain the presence of the paint chip matching his vehicle, could not justify the compatible soil traces from the disposal area, and continued to lack verifiable evidence of his location during the critical time window. Chloe could not explain the presence of her DNA on the evidence, could not prove her exact departure time from the center, and gave inconsistent answers when confronted with the forensic findings. Neither statement still aligned with the evidence as they had in 2002. Each new inconsistency further strengthened the hypothesis that they were connected to the circumstances of Marisa's disappearance. With the increasing contradictions and increasingly clear evidence matches, the investigation advanced to the high-level suspicion assessment phase for both Evan and Chloe. Pressure from the new forensic results, combined with an increasingly evident chain of contradictions in her statements, plunged Chloe Myers into a prolonged state of stress. When summoned for the third interview, she could no longer maintain the composure she had shown before. At first, Chloe continued to deny any involvement, but when investigators placed all the physical evidence in front of her, the fiber bearing her mixed DNA, the timeline comparison chart, and photographs of the paint fragment matching Evan's Dodge Ram, along with pointing out that every one of her previous statements was now incompatible with the new data, Chloe's psychological defenses began to collapse. During the first nearly hour, Chloe tried to cling to the argument that the presence of her DNA was purely coincidental and that she had absolutely no knowledge of Marisa's movements on the day she disappeared. But when investigators presented the information that the mixed DNA sample appeared, both in the cargo area and at the trailhead leading into the forest, and that this could only have occurred if she had direct contact with the area or items related to the victim, Chloe could no longer hold her tough facade. After nearly 20 minutes of prolonged silence, she broke down in tears and requested to tell everything exactly as it happened. The statement that broke the deadlock began with Chloe admitting that on the day Marisa went missing, Evan contacted her immediately after leaving the Family Visitation Center. Evan told her, "There's something that needs to be taken care of," and asked Chloe to stand by in the Jackson outskirts area to assist. Chloe confessed that at first she didn't know what Evan intended to do, but due to the years-long emotionally dependent relationship, she was willing to follow his instructions. Chloe stated that Evan approached Marisa while she was walking toward her vehicle in the center's parking lot, forced her into the car, then drove the SUV in the direction of Cottonwood Creek. This statement matched the 2002 witness account of seeing a dark-colored SUV leaving the center shortly after 6 p.m. Chloe said she was not present in the vehicle at the time Marisa was subdued, but was called by Evan to a pickup point not far from Cottonwood Creek to collect him after he abandoned the SUV. Chloe described the stopping location in detail: a dirt road section with low grass on the left and thick brush on the right, a description consistent with the road leading into Cottonwood Creek at the location where the vehicle was found in 2002. After picking up Evan, the two drove Evan's Dodge Ram deep into the Bridger-Teton Forest area. Chloe stated that Evan completely controlled the route, choosing trails that only someone familiar with the terrain would know. She described the path with astonishing accuracy, turning right at a large bush with a scorched trunk, crossing a small mound, then continuing to a gentle slope opening into an area with many fallen trees. When investigators compared these descriptions with the terrain data at the body recovery site, every detail matched 100%. This was the first time since 2002 that a statement accurately described the route leading to Marisa's body location. Chloe said that upon reaching the deep forest area, Evan pulled Marisa's body from the bed of the ram down the slope. She stated that she did not directly witness the entire disposal process because Evan told her to stand far away so she wouldn't have to see it. However, Chloe admitted seeing Evan return to the vehicle with clothes covered in mud and some dark stains that she believed to be blood. When asked what happened to those stains, Chloe stated that Evan asked her to help burn the clothes in a metal drum behind his house later that same night. Chloe accurately described the location of the metal drum, how Evan poured accelerant, and the process of both of them standing watch until the fabric was almost completely burned. This statement aligned with internal information recorded in 2002 that Evan's neighbors saw him burning something on the night of the disappearance, though the information was then considered irrelevant. In addition to burning the clothes, Chloe admitted that Evan asked her to help create an alibi. According to Chloe, Evan instructed her to call his landline phone around 7:45 p.m. and let it ring many times to create the impression that he was home at that time. Chloe confirmed that she made this call. The 2002 call history data had recorded a missed call to Evan's home phone at exactly this time, but it had previously not been considered significant. Chloe's admission of helping to create an alibi completely destroyed Evan's timeline. When asked to explain why her DNA appeared on the fiber near the body, Chloe confessed that while riding with Evan in the ram during the journey into the forest, she had been wearing a dark green jacket. This was a crucial detail. The fibers recovered at the trail and in the SUV cargo area were dark green and matched the fabric type Chloe described. Chloe explained that while Evan was dragging the body down the slope, she stepped out of the vehicle a few steps and accidentally brushed against a branch or thicket, causing the fiber to come loose and remain at the scene. This explained the presence of mixed DNA on the evidence. When investigators presented the additional fact that the fiber also appeared in the SUV's cargo area, Chloe admitted that she had opened the cargo area at Evan's request to check if anything had been left behind, causing the fiber to stick to the vehicle carpet. This statement perfectly matched the evidence collected in 2002. At the end of the interview session, when asked whether she saw Evan harm Marisa, Chloe said she did not witness it directly, but asserted that Marisa was no longer alive by the time we reached the forest. While this did not provide details about the cause of death, it reinforced the hypothesis that Evan was the one who directly caused the death, and that Chloe played a supporting role in disposing of the body and concealing evidence. Chloe's statement, which matched 100% with the terrain data, physical evidence, timeline, and paint fragment, completely broke the 15-year deadlock and placed Evan Rathner squarely in the position of primary suspect with the highest level of suspicion. After Chloe Meyer's statement opened up a complete chain of data regarding the case progression, the Forensic Reconstruction Unit of Wyoming DCI began reconstructing the entire crime journey by combining the new statement, the 2002 terrain maps, historical weather data, travel times on roads before modern expansions, and evidence analyses. The goal of the reconstruction was to determine whether the entire sequence of events, from Marisa leaving the center to the body being disposed of in the forest, could have plausibly occurred within the time frame when Evan's whereabouts were unaccounted for, while also verifying the reasonableness of each step Chloe described. The reconstruction began at the 5:41 p.m. timestamp, when Marisa was last seen leaving the Family Visitation Center. Based on Chloe's statement, Evan approached Marisa near the parking lot, forced her into the vehicle, and drove the SUV away from the center within minutes of her leaving the building. The reconstruction unit reanalyzed the 2002 Jackson Street map when traffic volume was lower than today, showing that the route from the center to Cottonwood Creek took approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Based on average vehicle speeds in uncongested conditions and Chloe's extremely detailed description of the dirt road section with low grass on the left, the experts concluded that the SUV could have arrived at the location described by the 2002 witness around 6 p.m., perfectly matching the original data. They reconstructed the route using speed simulation software based on late 1990s SUV models, showing an average journey time of 18 minutes from the center to Cottonwood Creek along the path Chloe described. Upon reaching Cottonwood Creek, Evan abandoned the SUV at the edge of the dirt road leading into the forest, precisely where law enforcement found the vehicle. The reconstruction unit incorporated slope, ground surface, moisture, and lighting conditions for late October 2002 into the simulation. Using historical weather data showing dry skies and temperatures rapidly dropping from 4 degrees Celsius to 1 degree Celsius after 6 p.m. The dim lighting combined with dense brush on both sides of the road explained why no one on the main road noticed the SUV during that period. After abandoning the vehicle, Evan either ran or was transported by Chloe to a rendezvous point a few hundred meters away, consistent with Chloe's account of picking Evan up in the low grass area. The reconstruction unit verified the feasibility of this movement through distance and time simulation. A distance under 500 meters could be covered in 3-5 minutes on foot, fully consistent with the overall timeline. From the Cottonwood Creek rendezvous point, Evan entered the 1998 Dodge Ram driven by Chloe. To reconstruct the route into the Bridgerton Forest, the team used 2002 terrain maps, which included many unofficial but still existing trails in survey data. Chloe had described turning into the forest past a scorched tree section, crossing a small mound, and continuing to an area with many fallen trees. 3 distinctive terrain features that still exist near the body discovery site. When overlaying the statement onto the map and historical satellite imagery, the reconstruction team found near-perfect correspondence between the described journey and the route leading to the slope where Marisa's skeletal remains were found in 2017. This match confirmed that the disposal route could not have been guessed or imagined, but must have been known by someone who had actually traveled through the area at the time. The reconstruction unit further analyzed the feasibility of the 1998 Dodge Ram, navigating the described forest route. Based on 2002 trail width data, tree root height, soil softness, and average slope, they concluded that a pickup of the Ram's size could traverse this path without leaving long-lasting visible tracks, explaining why search teams in 2002 found no clear tire marks. Analysis continued into the body disposal phase. The reconstruction unit used 15-year post-mortem decomposition data, fracture patterns, and skeletal distribution at the scene to determine the original body position. The body's location at the edge of a gentle slope and covered by fallen trees matched Chloe's account that Evan dragged the body down from the vehicle and left it in an area out of sight. The natural scattering of bones was consistent with small animal activity and extended time, with no signs of recent disturbance. This confirmed the body had been at that location since near the time of the disappearance, consistent with the timeline in Chloe's statement. When reconstructing the entire crime journey, from the moment Marisa left the center until Evan and Chloe left the forest, the reconstruction unit calculated the total duration required for the sequence of actions. Simulation results showed the entire process approaching the victim, traveling to Cottonwood Creek, disposing of the body in the forest, and returning to populated areas took between 1 hour 10 minutes and 1 hour 25 minutes, depending on travel speed. This time frame perfectly matched the unaccounted gap in Evan's timeline from 5:41 p.m. to 7:20 p.m., during which neither his nor Chloe's whereabouts could be confirmed. This reinforced the expert conclusion that the criminal conduct was entirely feasible within the available time, did not conflict with historical data, and fully aligned with Chloe's statement, as well as all evidence collected over 15 years. The reconstruction unit affirmed that the reconstruction model demonstrated near absolute correspondence between the statement, physical evidence, and real-world conditions, placing Evan Rathner at the center of suspicion as the person who directly caused Marisa's death, and Chloe Myers as an accomplice who assisted throughout the body disposal and evidence concealment process. Once the crime journey reconstruction confirmed that Chloe Myers' statement fully matched the physical evidence, terrain, and timeline, the Special Investigation Team proceeded to the next legal step, obtaining arrest warrants for Evan Rathner and Chloe. The warrant application was submitted to the Teton County judge, compiling all forensic data, the paint fragment matching Evan's 1998 Dodge Ram, soil samples compatible between the vehicle undercarriage and the body discovery site, Chloe's mixed DNA on fibers recovered from the SUV cargo area and Cottonwood Creek Trail, along with Chloe's detailed statement describing the disposal route and concealment actions. This compilation exceeded the threshold required to establish probable cause and direct involvement of both individuals. The judge promptly approved an arrest warrant for Evan Rathner on the charge of murder in the first degree, and an arrest warrant for Chloe Myers on charges of accessory after the fact to disposal of a body and obstruction of justice. The arrest team was deployed the very next morning. Evan was arrested at his workplace, a martial arts training center in Jackson, in a state of surprise and without resistance. He was handcuffed according to procedure and read his constitutional rights before being transported to the Teton County Jail. Chloe was arrested several hours later at her rented apartment near town. When the warrant was presented, she did not object, and only silently nodded, indicating she had mentally prepared for arrest following her statement. Simultaneously with the arrests, investigators executed a supplemental search warrant signed at the same time at Evan's residence. At Evan's home, forensic personnel discovered several items potentially related to the disposal. A metal drum located behind the house bearing black burn marks consistent with Chloe's account of burning clothes in the garage. Partially burned fiber material was collected for analysis to determine whether it matched the type of fabric Marisa had been wearing. And a small box containing numerous gas receipts, recording times and locations, matching the Jackson outskirts area during the period of the crime. Additionally, in a nightstand drawer in Evan's bedroom, police recovered an old topographic map of Bridger-Titten National Forest, on which a trail had been marked in red pen, matching the disposal route Chloe described in her statement. Although the map was not independent incriminating evidence, the marking of the trail demonstrated Evan's detailed knowledge of the forest terrain, consistent with the hypothesis that he deliberately selected the disposal location. In the garage, the forensic team also seized the 1998 Dodge Ram for further analysis. Wear marks and peeling paint along the rear door edge were consistent with the paint fragment recovered at the body recovery site. Seizure of the vehicle allowed for deeper analysis of the undercarriage structure to compare with fresh soil samples if necessary. The entire arrest and search process occurred on the same day to ensure no opportunity for evidence destruction. After Evan Rathner and Chloe Myers were taken into custody and the additional series of evidence was collected from Evan's home and the garage containing the 1998 Dodge Ram, the case entered the pre-trial phase, where prosecutors and forensic experts collaborated to build a complete charging package before presenting it to Teton County Court. The prosecuting attorney began by compiling all investigative materials spanning 15 years, the original 2002 missing person report, Cottonwood Creek search records, evidence recovered from Bridger-Titten Forest in 2017, new forensic analysis results, Chloe's detailed statement, and the Forensic Reconstruction Unit's crime journey report. All this data was organized into a clearly structured charging document, presenting the timeline by specific milestones: 5:41 p.m., the moment Marisa left the center, the time frame the vehicle appeared at Cottonwood Creek, the period Evan lacked an alibi, and the points of correspondence with Chloe's statement. The prosecution also cross-referenced 2002 evidence with 2017 evidence to argue that the initially fragmented data only gained full meaning when placed in the new context, thereby forming an irrefutable logical chain, the paint fragment matching the Dodge Ram, Chloe's mixed DNA traces at multiple locations, soil samples from Evan's vehicle undercarriage, matching the geological layer at the body discovery site, and Evan's marked topographic map corresponding to the disposal route. In parallel, the prosecution's legal team prepared a comprehensive evidentiary package, including crime scene photographs, terrain diagrams, DNA analysis charts, mineral survey results, evidence comparison tables, and forensic conclusions regarding the feasibility of the crime within Evans' unaccounted time frame. These documents were systematized according to evidentiary package standards, ensuring that all evidence presented in court would have clear linkage, traceable origin, and appropriate legal explanation. On the opposing side, defense attorneys for Evan and Chloe began preparing their counter-strategies. Evan's attorney focused on arguing that there was no direct eyewitness to Evan harming Marisa, and that the forensic evidence, while matching, was still circumstantial. They contended that the paint fragment could have come from any similar ram, the soil could have been picked up on the undercarriage due to regional geology, and the mixed DNA on the fiber lacked sufficient resolution for absolute source identification. Evan's defense also prepared to challenge the reliability of Chloe's statement, emphasizing that it was given under pressure and aimed at minimizing her own responsibility. Chloe's attorney took a different approach, focusing on proving that she did not directly cause Marisa's death, but only participated in concealment out of fear and long-term psychological influence by Evan. They gathered documentation demonstrating the emotionally dependent relationship, Evan's control over many years, and Chloe's lack of experience in handling high-stress situations to seek mitigation of criminal liability. Meanwhile, forensic experts finalized their technical reports, including microanalysis of the fibers, paint analysis, stratum matching confirmation, detailed description of the decomposition process, and conclusion that the body had been in the forest since the time of the disappearance. The full crime journey reconstruction report received its final revision with precise travel times, feasibility assessment of each step, and expert evaluation that the entire criminal process could have been completed within the unaccounted time frame of Evan and Chloe. After final review of all forensic documents, statements, reconstruction report, evidence comparison tables, and expert reports, the prosecution file was finalized and officially transferred to Teton County Court to schedule the trial date. Completion of the charging package marked the critical transition from investigation to prosecution, where 15 years of accumulated evidence would be presented in a tight, cohesive legal structure, preparing for the trial of the two suspects in the once nearly perfectly frozen missing person homicide case that had remained unsolved for over a decade. The trial of Evan Rathner and Chloe Myers opened at Teton County Court nearly 2 decades after Marisa Langford's disappearance, drawing special attention as one of the rare cold cases to be reactivated thanks to modern forensic technology. From the very first day, the prosecution presented an indictment built on a 15-year chain of evidence, a detailed timeline from the moment Marisa left the Family Visitation Center, the discovery location of the SUV at Cottonwood Creek, the journey into the Bridger-Teton Forest, the discovery of skeletal remains in 2017, and key forensic results. The prosecution clearly described Evan's potential motive related to the child custody dispute and Chloe's supporting role based on an emotionally dependent romantic relationship, laying the foundation for the argument that both acted in coordination. Next, the prosecution introduced forensic physical evidence, paint chips recovered near the body that matched the exterior paint layer of Evan's 1998 Dodge Ram, proving the vehicle's possible presence at the disposal site. Soil samples taken from under Evan's vehicle in 2002 containing minerals consistent with the geological layer where the remains were found, reinforcing the hypothesis that the Ram had traveled through the deep forest area, and mixed DNA on a dark green fiber recovered from the cargo area of Marisa's SUV and at the Cottonwood Creek trailhead, showing genetic characteristics consistent with Chloe's DNA profile. The prosecution emphasized that no single piece of evidence independently proved guilt completely, but when viewed together, they formed a tight logical chain leading to the conclusion that Evan directly caused Marisa's death, while Chloe was an active accomplice in aiding disposal and concealment of the crime. Subsequently, forensic experts presented the technical analysis portion, paint spectroscopy, advanced STR DNA testing, soil mineral comparison, decomposition state analysis, and skeletal positioning within the forest terrain. The reconstruction unit team detailed the crime journey simulation, using historical data on roads, vehicle speeds, lighting, and terrain from 2002 to demonstrate that the entire sequence of actions could have occurred within the time period for which Evan had no alibi. Three-dimensional reconstructed maps and simulation videos were shown to the jury, clearly indicating each timeline milestone where the criminal journey aligned with Chloe's statements and the physical evidence. When the prosecution called Chloe Myers to the stand, the courtroom became tense. Chloe, in a more stable psychological state than in the early stages, confirmed her entire prior statement to investigators, Evan's request for her assistance, her picking him up after the SUV was abandoned, the route taken into the forest, Evan dragging the body down the slope, and the burning of clothing to dispose of evidence. She also admitted to making the alibi-creating phone call for Evan around 7:45 p.m., exactly as recorded in the historical call data. The prosecution asked Chloe to describe the terrain at the disposal site in detail, and her descriptions, charred bushes, small mound of earth, fallen tree covering the slope, matched perfectly with the location where the skeletal remains were discovered in 2017. The consistency between her testimony, the physical evidence, and the terrain reconstruction helped the prosecution strengthen the argument that Chloe could not have fabricated such a precise route unless she had witnessed the events. During closing arguments, Evan's defense counsel focused on questioning the accuracy of the forensic evidence, arguing that the paint chips could have come from hundreds of rams produced in the same year. The soil could have adhered to the undercarriage from any natural location in Wyoming, and Chloe's testimony was influenced by psychological pressure. They stressed that no eyewitness saw Evan harm Marisa, and that no DNA or fingerprints of Evan were found at the disposal site. However, the prosecution countered by pointing out that forensic evidence does not need to prove the absolute origin of each sample with certainty. What matters is that they fit together into a behavioral pattern, and that pattern aligns with Chloe's guiding testimony. Chloe's defense maintained that she did not directly harm Marisa, but was merely drawn in by Evan, attempting to mitigate her accomplice liability. The prosecution accepted this point but emphasized that Chloe's knowledge and assistance in disposing of the body made her criminally liable. The argument stretched over many days, with each side presenting points about the alignment between the timeline, physical evidence, and testimony. The prosecution repeatedly reaffirmed that no piece of evidence stood in isolation: the paint chips, soil samples, fiber, SUV, forest route, time of disappearance, testimony, and forensic simulations all supported one another, eliminating the possibility of random coincidence. When both sides concluded their arguments, the judge sent the jury into deliberation with legal instructions to evaluate the charge of murder in the first degree against Evan and the charge of accessory after the fact against Chloe. After more than 8 hours of discussion, the jury returned to the courtroom and delivered their verdict. Evan Rathner was found guilty of murder in the first degree, based on the strong linkage between the evidence and the reconstructed criminal conduct. Chloe Myers was found guilty in her role as an accessory after the fact, including aiding in disposal, destruction of evidence, and creating an alibi for Evan. The sentence for Evan reflected the severity of an intentional premeditated killing and the deliberate concealment of the body in the forest for many years, while the sentence for Chloe demonstrated a clear distinction between direct and supporting roles without reducing her responsibility. As the judge read the final judgment, the case was officially concluded, marking the successful resolution of a cold case that had remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades. The court's decision affirmed the irreplaceable role of modern forensics, from mineral analysis, paint spectroscopy, low-level DNA, to three-dimensional crime scene reconstruction, in connecting seemingly disparate pieces of evidence into a coherent, continuous chain of logic. The Marisa Langford case has become a striking example that advances in forensic science can resurrect files long thought permanently lost to oblivion, and that the persistence of investigators, combined with next-generation forensic cross-referencing, can bring the truth back to light, even after many years buried beneath the forests of Wyoming. The Marisa Langford case, the disappearance of a young mother in Jackson, Wyoming in 2002, and the nearly two-decade journey to uncover the truth not only reflect the progress of forensic science, but also touch on very real issues in contemporary American society. Domestic violence, psychological manipulation, misplaced trust, and a legal system that sometimes takes many years to bring the truth to light. The story shows how Marisa tried to protect her son amid a bitter child custody dispute, a situation far from unfamiliar to many American families. Evan's quiet nurturing of conflict, creation of a false alibi, and emotional control over Chloe serve as clear evidence of the power-abuse relationship dynamic that many psychologists warn about. Victims often do not realize they are being controlled until it is far too late. The story also underscores the value of leaving a legal trail. The initial reports by Jackson PD, photographs taken under Evan's vehicle, evidence collected from Bridger Teton Forest, though not immediately usable, became the key pieces 15 years later. In reality, this reminds American citizens of the importance of promptly reporting threatening, violent, or unusual behavior, no matter how minor it may seem. Additionally, Chloe's testimony, as a secondary victim of manipulation, demonstrates that silence protects no one, and the courage to speak the truth can save oneself from the spiral of guilt while bringing justice to others. The most important lesson from the Marisa Langford case is this: truth may take many years to emerge, but it only emerges when people and systems persist together. In modern life, where technology, law, and human behavior constantly intersect, every individual needs to pay attention to danger signs in relationships, know how to seek timely support, and trust in the value of preserving information, because sometimes the very things we thought had been forgotten forever become crucial evidence for protecting justice and preserving life. Thank you for joining us in exploring the journey to solve the Marisa Langford case. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next investigative files. See you in the next video, where we will continue diving deep into cases that seemed lost to time, but are still waiting to be brought into the light.